All right. So here we are. We are going to record a podcast today using Skype. I'm about to make a call. To my co-host. Well, hello, sir. How are you? Doing very well. Broadcasting live here on YouTube. Okay. Can hear you well. Are you in any good spot to talk here, Steve? Cool. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jared, and I'm here with Stampede Blue. Joining me today, who I'll just call another host as opposed to co-host. This is Stephen Reed from Stampede Blue as well. And in the absence of Matt Danley, who did the Colts cast for us for a couple years, obviously we can't replace his consistency or how frequently he recorded a podcast, but we're certainly going to try. Stephen and I are going to talk today. We're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to talk about today, for the record, is 20 days exactly until rookies start reporting to minicamp, and 42 days before week 1 of the preseason. So, right, we are currently in the moratorium period, right? There's literally nothing going on. Right. Generally speaking, of course, and then at this point, all the information we've gotten is that we have signed all of the rookies, right? So every guy that we drafted, we signed, which I'm pretty positive every player that was drafted has been signed up to this point on every team. But so it's not like that's a major feat. But in addition to what appears to be a pretty good rookie minicamp, right? That was all the word I heard coming out of rookie minicamp is, hey, everybody that we pick looked great, right? And then now guys are getting a couple weeks off here. I don't know if you saw today. Did you see the redraft for 2012? I wanted to bring that up to you, Stephen Reed, today. I saw Focus redid the 2012 NFL draft and had the Colts selecting Russell Wilson, number 1 overall, Andrew Luck going number 2 overall to Washington Redskins. Now, obviously, we live in reality where I still think we made the right decision. And I just wanted to get your input there. Sarcasm is, for the record, part of conversations I like to have, so feel free. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, duh. No, I'm just kidding. Right. Right. I mean, and then the bigger, in my opinion, the bigger indicator of long term success in the NFL is size, right? So the number one reason that if I look at their college careers, the reason I take Andrew Luck every single time is because he's 6'4", 230 pounds, as opposed to 5'10", 200 pounds. And I'm investing a first overall draft pick in the future of my franchise at the quarterback position. I would prefer if that person wasn't one hit away from a wheelchair, right? Now, I get it. Andrew Luck missed an entire season with a shoulder injury, but Russell Wilson's been banged up his entire career. He averages getting sacked 42 times a year. Now, that certainly says nothing about their offensive line, and their success, despite him getting sacked so frequently, kind of signifies he's actually a really good quarterback. But I did a little research, because I'm one of those people, if I'm going to have an opinion, it's going to be rooted in fact, because otherwise your opinion is worthless. Apparently we have to defend Andrew Luck's honor because we know, every NFL fan, you meet five of them, one of them's a Seattle fan, and they're going to talk shit about Andrew Luck, right? So here I went and looked. While Russell Wilson is better statistically in many categories, there are a couple things that kind of struck me. In Russell Wilson's first 4 seasons as an NFL quarterback, the defense for the Seattle Seahawks was ranked number 1 in the NFL. Now I get it. Defensive play does not dictate quarterback play. But hear me out, kids. If you're winning, there's less of an onus on you to score and score quickly to come back, right? And with that in mind, I did a little further research. In 112 games started, Russell Wilson has 17 comebacks and 23 game-winning drives. Having missed a full season in the same time period, Andrew Luck has 16 comebacks, so 1 less comeback win, and 20 game-winning drives and 86 starts. Yeah, so I actually, there's not really a term for this, and I expect maybe at some point there will be, but basically I looked at 40, which is 17 and 23 for Russell Wilson in 112 games, as basically like 35% of the games that he plays in, he is relied on to win that game personally, right? Like the offensive success hinges on whether or not they lose. That's a game-winning drive or a comeback victory, right? Andrew Luck's 36 of whatever we want to call that metric in 86 starts is about 41%. So whatever metric you want to call that, which I would call like games where your quarterback directly affected the outcome. If it weren't for your quarterback, you lose. So I would say Andrew Luck is a more clutch quarterback statistically with less games played, but the same amount of time has passed. So I understand, again, from a building a franchise perspective, that, well, the Seattle Seahawks got really lucky and they drafted a bunch of defensive players that should have gone in the first round. In the second, third, and fourth round, they did it for a few years, and that helped build their young team, just much like the Colts are trying to do now. But here's another piece of information that I discovered today. 2018, so this past year, is the first year in which an Indianapolis Colts defense was better statistically than a Seattle Seahawks defense. Andrew Luck threw for 1,100 more yards and 5 more touchdowns. So again, I'd say defense dictates what your quarterback's going to be able to do over the course of a football game, and that is very easy to explain. If your defense is horrible and they can't get off the field, then your quarterback has to go out and score quickly, and that causes mistakes to happen. So yeah, Andrew Luck also has more interceptions. But if you look at trend, Russell Wilson is a great quarterback, and his play is trending upward. That's true. But he's been hit a lot, sacked a lot, and eventually he's going to get banged up. Whereas if you look at the Colts, they have decided to protect Andrew Luck at all costs. And it yielded 39 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, but only 18 sacks. Russell Wilson got sacked 42 times last year. So who do I want now? Andrew Luck. It's not even close. Who did I want the last couple years? Maybe Russell, because Andrew Luck wasn't even here, right? But then look at the beginning of their careers. They had the same trajectory early, right? Both teams were very competitive. 2012, 2013, 2014, their first 3 years. Colts made the playoffs 3 years in a row, so did Seattle. And then, of course, Seattle didn't run there on the goal line and lost the Super Bowl, so that's their fault. Right. That's literally a crime against Colts fans. So I find it hilarious that Pro Football Focus says if the Colts had this to do over again, they'd have drafted Russell Wilson over Andrew Luck. Pro Football Talk. Sure. Pro Football Talk. Okay. Gotcha. My apologies to those fine people over at Pro Football Focus. I'm just kidding. So obviously we've created a lot of content centered around the draft because as we've kind of acknowledged here as Colts fans during this Ballard regime, the Ballard Reich regime, they're heavily focused on having a young athletic team with a lot of versatility and depth. Obviously, we could sit here and wax philosophic on the draft, but let's talk today about the actual acquisitions. The Justin Houston acquisition, the Devin Funchess acquisition, and I'll just start by asking you this. Are you satisfied with those moves in terms of how it helps us at those two positions specifically? Like, are you satisfied with those moves? Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And here we're going to take a call real quick from a guest, okay? Give me just a moment. Oh, it was coming in. Hello, hello? Nope, you're still there. You still there, Steve? Okay, never mind. So they hung up. No, no, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let me take this call real quick, brother. All right. Let's see what this is going to do. Well, hello there. How are you? Well, hello there, Shipra. How are you? It's another beautiful day. It's good to hear your voice. I am live right now on YouTube, recording episode 1 of Yet to Be Named podcast here on Stampede Blue. Joining us live, Chris Shepard, one of my favorite writers, content creators, our offensive line guru, our man of the trenches. I think that's a pretty good word for it, right? So 20 days out from rookies reporting to training camp, we could talk all day about the rookies. I was just talking to Steven Shepard about, hey, instead of yakking about these rookies, let them show themselves in training camp. How do you feel the acquisitions of Justin Houston and Devin Funchess specifically filled the kind of holes we were looking to fill? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're thinking probably not the smartest pick or decision there to take kind of an unknown quantity or at least one a player that had questions similar to like a Eric Ebron, right? I think that the knock on Ebron before he came to Indy was that he had problems with drops, right? And I think the same was being said about Devin Funchess. Um, Now, that said, we're, again, like I said, about 20 days out, 42 days from week one of the preseason. Colts first four games. Just want to get your initial thoughts here. We play the Chargers week one, and then it's Matt Ryan, Marcus Mariota, and Derek Carr to round out the first four games. Looking simply at quarterback matchups, the only game that's even close is the week one game, right? No. Mr. Reed's on hold while I talk to you, brother. Yeah, right. 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 And I think if you look at consistency as a franchise among those first four teams we play specifically, obviously week five is the big one, right? That's the matchup with the Chiefs. But in the first 4 weeks, you say, really, if you can put Philip Rivers on his heels, right, and you think taking a guy like Justin Houston out of the AFC West the year you play the AFC West, that ought to go a long way to kind of to helping you kind of overcome that week one that is kind of daunting. You know, if you look at the Chargers historically, that franchise is pretty competitive year in and year out, right? So if you look at the first 4 weeks, like, oh, well, if you can get over that week one hump, you should be able to get out of that first quarter, right? Because that's how franchises are starting to tackle the season now, right? Is cut the season into four quarters, right? So that's what I want my initial podcast to talk about, right? Like, let's talk about those first four games briefly, obviously. But we look at it, we say, hey, if you beat the Chargers, there's no reason you shouldn't be 4-0. No reason. Because, yeah, right, right, right. Absolutely. Who came prepared to go 1-0, right? That's that mindset they're kind of passing along. Well, I tell you what, I do appreciate you giving us a call today, Chris. Really glad to hear your voice again, my man. And I'm gonna get back over here with Steve, and we're gonna wrap this thing up. I appreciate you, man. I will do. Have a good day, brother. Yeah, you too. Bye. All right. And there we are back. Just spent a few minutes talking with Chris Shepard there, Mr. Reed. Okay. Yeah. So up at this point here, episode one, we are using Skype, which will only, for some reason, allow a two-way conversation. So when Chris Shepard called in, it wouldn't let me take the call and keep us all three on the call. And I am assuming that's something I'll have to work out. But we'll work on that because we certainly want to be able to do live podcasts. We are live on YouTube. I am also going to record the podcast so we can share it later. Now, that said, I kind of asked some similar questions, but I wanted to come back to you and ask the follow-up to the follow-up to the follow-up. If you look at the first 4 weeks, the Colts, and I'm one of those people because I pay very close attention to quarterback play, and I played like tight end and defensive end, so I kind of pay attention to the big pass catchers and the big pass rushers and the quarterbacks because I think those things are the most important positions in football, and that's just my opinion. So, would I look at the Colts season much like the Colts do, other franchises do, other football programs do, not just in the NFL. I look at you break the season down into four quarters, right? And you look at the first 4 weeks, and in no specific order, but roughly, the Colts play Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, Marcus Mariota, and Derek Carr. Of course, starting the season off week 1 against the Chargers, and I'd kind of put it to Chris. I'll put it to you. If the Colts come in week 1 and beat one of the most consistent franchises in the NFL in the Chargers, right, in the AFC West, there's no reason they don't go 4-0, right, to start the season. Right. If you can overcome Phillip Rivers week 1 of your 2019 campaign, knowing who you play after that, there's no reason you shouldn't be 4-0, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. It's like consistency over time. That's why he's got like a dozen kids now. Yeah, so I think he has 12 kids. Yeah. Right. No, no, no. Like, come on. You could say it nicely. Like, it doesn't matter if it's here in Nashville. Like, that's not a game I'm. Oh man, that's an any given Sunday type game. Week 1, in my opinion, of the first 4 weeks is the only week that I would say that's an any given Sunday game. Right? Anything can happen. Philip Rivers is a talented quarterback. That franchise is pretty consistent. That roster is pretty good. Right? Yeah. Hmm. Right. 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 I mean, let's face it, the Raiders are going to be on HBO's show Hard Knocks this year, right? So they're being looked at as entertaining, right? And I understand that part of football. They're probably going to be a very entertaining football team. But being entertaining does not mean being competitive and being able to do what, from my perspective, what the Colts are wanting to do, which is play that old school, be very aggressive up front, move the ball down the field by any means necessary, and with the idea of running the ball consistently, much like the teams the Colts typically struggle against. Right, your Baltimores, your Pittsburghs, your New Englands. These programs run the ball well. They maintain ball control. They score touchdowns. They're efficient, and then they play pretty good defense. And then like we were just talking about earlier in the podcast, like think about this: the best performing defense the Colts have had, I would argue, since 1998. That's 20 years. Was the 2018 10th ranked defense in the league. And then the question of, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, well, right. Right, and this is obviously no disrespect to them. I'm one of those people. I think purely from a data perspective, and it's like, hey, if you just look at numbers, obviously last year's defense from a lot of us, you watch these games, you say, man, they're a player or two away from having a top 5 defense in the NFL. And a lot of the time that was, oh, we're not generating enough of a pass rush. The quarterback's got all day to throw. It was a third down play, and they ran a play action, and he rolled out, and he had 4 months to figure it out. Right. And a lot of that is just like you just said, not having enough interior quickness to stymie that check down pass to the running back, or that little dump off to the tight end, or the comeback route to the outside receiver, or that little in and out, the slot runs, or whatever. And I think, and then now this year, you look at the Colts. So I guess we can sort of talk about how guys are going to plug into the defense. So if you just look at, for example, like the Rock Ya-Sin pick fits pretty cleanly in at like your number 2 corner, and kind of how they've lined him up. Pierre Desir at the 1, of course, then Rock at 2, gives you like Kenny Moore to cover a slot receiver, and then like Nate Hairston to kind of back that whole crew up. That is an improvement right across the board. Really? Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it's a complete turnover of the franchise. I think one of the things that Brett and I remember, because we live 5 minutes from each other, one of the things that we've been saying the last couple years, particularly, is look at all the roster turnover. I think if I remember, and I'm probably wrong, but it was something along the lines of from year 1 to year 2 of the Ballard regime, it was something like 27, so roughly half, because 53, right? So 27, 27 is 54. 27 players were new in year 1. And then last year, from before Chris Ballard was here, it was something along the lines of 44 of 53. It's like there was 9 players on the entire roster that were here before Chris Ballard took over. And a lot of that, of course, has to do with bad player evaluation, in my opinion, on the behalf of the exiting Polian regime slash, well, I mean, he might as well be Voldemort to me, but what was his name? Grigson. That regime obviously kind of failed at player evaluation. It's one of the things that we were talking about amongst ourselves the other day, was talking about how when the Colts traded for what was it? Was it T.J. Richardson? Jared Richardson. How even Bill Polian said that looked like a great deal for the Colts, right? And then obviously hindsight's 2020, not the case at all. Although I did sarcastically point out Trent Richardson was still a terror in the AAF, RIP, the Birmingham Iron. Every week I wrote about him, he had scored 1 or more touchdowns. None of them were terribly impressive, and largely most of them were him running with his head down into the back of his offensive lineman, much like he did here in Indianapolis. And you'd see a hole, right? It'd be like a blind person running downhill, right? Like there was a hay bale there, man. Okay, like that. That's a lot of Trent Richardson's highlights are largely, it's similar to watching people like wreck on a skateboard. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he's skateboarding. Sure. Oh, that hurt. It's similar to watching Trent Richardson. You're like, oh, he's got a gap as big as a semi. Oh, he tripped and fell. Like, that's T Rich for you. But speaking of running backs, we look at the Colts here. We did not address that position. So obviously we're pretty satisfied with the play of Marlon Mack. and with the new guys, uh, obviously you're gonna have to spread the ball around a little bit more this year, right? Like you're getting back Jack Doyle. You drafted Paris Campbell. I think this takes the ball out of the hands of guys like Jordan Wilkins, Naheem Hines, maybe. Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Right. That was one of the things I was thinking about when the Colts got Devin Funchess was well, now who do you lose to, right? Do you lose to Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle, or Devin Funchess? And again, we've yet to talk about like the man of the hour, right? Like the T.Y. Hilton problem, who's consistently a problem for defenses, and it really doesn't matter what they do. It's almost like, to me, as someone who's been watching the Colts since as long as I can remember, T.Y. Hilton is already in my mind in terms of impact and how dynamic he is. He's up there with Reggie Wayne, with Marvin Harrison as one of the best Colts receivers of all time, and obviously coming in a little bit of a tumultuous period, right? Like Andrew Luck's been kind of banged up and missed a full season. That kind of hurts the early mid portion of his career. But here he is. Last year, what do you have? A double ankle injury and still just absolutely torching people. Right. Oh, for sure. Going upstairs are like not an option. Right. And then you think about the general wear and tear on an athlete over time, and then it's just compounded by the fact that you choose to play through it because of I'm pretty positive I've figured out what happened. For the record, I don't know if I've ever told you this. I'm pretty positive I figured out what happened during that players only meeting. And I'm not trying to be. It may come out funny. It may not come out funny, but that's what I'm trying shooting for is funny. Andrew Luck studied architecture, and I don't know any architect. I don't know any artifacts. What are you saying? I don't know any architect. I don't know any architects. But when I go think about the type of planning and coordination it takes to, for example, like build a building, and then you turn the planning and organizing and structure of being of planning to build a building, and then turn that football, right? You take that laser focus, that everything must be this precise, and I'm going to put the ball here. I think Andrew Luck sat everyone down and said, this is exactly what everyone is going to do, word for word, to the letter, every day. I wrote out all your parts, right? Right. And here's exactly how this is going to work. And I always think of Andrew Luck becoming like the architect that became a maestro, right? Like so in the beginning, he was the guy that had no problem with the hammer and the nail, but in the end, he picked up the wand and decided to just make it look like a ticket. The Colts offense is going to go from being like a really cool band to like going to see the orchestra, right? That the more depth and talent, obviously when you protect your quarterback and then the next season you dedicate towards providing him with additional weaponry, like you've turned a top 5 offense into the, you know, I would never say that a team is going to have the offensive output like a Kansas City team did last year, but I think everybody said the same thing about the Rams in the late 90s, right? Like nobody saw that coming. Yeah, I was talking to Chris Shepard and I asked him a similar question about Devin Funchess. He said he's not very high on him. One of the things I wanted to point out about Devin Funchess is a similar thought process to Eric Ebron. The knock on both players is their hands. But again, I'm not just a NFL fan. I'm not just a Colts fan. I watch college football too. Neither Cam nor Matt Stafford have ever been lauded for having a great deal of touch. And I understand that from the receiver's perspective, if you can touch it, you can catch it, right? And I understand that these are the, and I'm one of those people. I am never for a corporation. I am never for a business. I am for the person, right? The individual matters to me more. When you make statements like Eric Ebron can't catch or Devin Funchess has hand issues, to me, it's like looking at a gunshot wound victim and saying, well, if they'd have turned a little, they would have survived, right? Like, well, if you think about the shooter, or in this case, the thrower of the football, there are lots of people. I remember seeing, and I could be completely wrong. If I remember correctly, there's a video where Matt Stafford is throwing balls, just playing catch at the Pro Bowl. And 3 or 4 players, after they've caught a ball from him, are walking by him talking about how hard he throws the football. Oh, yeah. Right. 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 And then you think about some of these guys do it effortlessly, right? Like, so you have guys in the NFL that are known for having great hands. But again, I'm one of those people, I just went and looked at the numbers and was like, Ebron and Funchess have had their issues with drops. But look at their production in the red zone when it matters. Oh, they're touchdown scorers. They're machines. They have a natural mismatch. If the ball's on target, probably going to bring it down. You're probably going to be okay. So, of course, kind of differing, and it's good. You always want to have multiple people's opinions. Nothing is true. We don't know anything. We're literally prognosticating everything unless we've already got tape, and we don't have tape. We're talking about things that haven't even happened yet. But mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So as we close here, brother, we're about 45 minutes in. Want to talk about, obviously, training camp is coming up, preseason's coming up. If you're the Colts right now, before everybody's under the same roof, Is there anything you're still looking for, personnel-wise? Are you thinking right now, like, we're kind of hamstrung at this position. Maybe we should look at another guy. I guess the first question is, there can be acquisitions between now and the 20th, right? So you pick up a guy if he's unsigned. And any action? Do you think anything's? I guess that's a better way to end it. Do you think anything's going to happen between now and training camp, or do you think the Colts are in a position to kind of wait and see? Yeah. Absolutely, right? Right. 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 Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Which is a good feeling, right? That was the reason I asked. The last several years leading into a season, it's been nothing but, oh gosh, we didn't address this. It's gonna have to get addressed during the season. What are we gonna do? This year kind of feels like, well, as long as everyone stays healthy, there's enough talent here that, maybe we won't see a lot of roster turnover this season. Maybe we'll see a team gel, which is what I've been kind of beating that drum ever since I started getting on the camera, saying like, hey, if you look at the franchises that are winning, they're consistent. They don't have a ton of turnover. They might have coaches that take promotions, but by and large, that staff is largely the same. That roster's changing just because they're drafting guys. And like you said, it's their 60s and 90s that are changing, not their 53. Their 53 is guys are here for 5-10 years at a time, specifically at offensive line. If you look at, and again, I know I'm talking about enemies, right? I'm talking about the Steelers specifically and the Patriots specifically. They draft well and they keep their players and they let their free agents test the market. And if you get a better deal elsewhere, go. And those players even come back. And then kind of to wrap it all up, I want to posit a question. You can, of course, answer it now, or you can say, I probably need to do a little research before I do that. 20 days from training camp, if you had to pick right now a 16-0 team and an 0-16 team, who's your 16-0? who's your 0-16, and you could say there will be no 0-16 or there will be no 16-0. Obviously, there will be no 16-0 is perfectly acceptable. However, sure, I have him like a 12-4, 11-5, game or two better next year. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I don't think they have a chance. I mean, if you really think about taking D Ford and Justin Houston away from an already 30th ranked defense. Right. Right. But that's a non-divisional game, right? So it doesn't my thought process is if you're winning your division, you're X1, X2, right? And that's six games. And then you've got 10 games left. You need to win, 4 more of your division games, and then you need 5 or 6 other wins, right? So if you look at the other teams that you're playing, with the exception of the Chiefs, who are by and large a Mahomes-led boat with no rudder, right? Like all they have is Patrick Mahomes. That's pretty much it. Kareem Hunt's gone. Tyreek Hill, who knows? He shouldn't even be in the league. But again, Andy Reid's kind of been the quarterback whisperer in his career, and from the looks of it, he's got Travis Kelce, they've got weapons, but if you look at that defense, what is your expectation? We're going to score 50. Can you also do that? Like, is that the game plan? Yeah, just for the record, Chiefs fans, if you were wondering if that pans out, the answer is no. I mean, if you have a good enough quarterback, it may get you to the playoffs, but it's not winning you much. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about. Of course, looking ahead is saying for the first time in a long time, I feel like we have stability on the roster, talent on this roster. The schedule is more difficult. It's nowhere near what people look at it and say, like, oh, the Colts are going to lose 7 games. Like I saw today 2 different networks, ESPN and NFL Network, saying the Colts aren't even going to win their division. And for the record, both networks had different division winners. One was Jacksonville, one was Houston. But again, I'm forced to look at data. The Houston Texans didn't even have a full draft last year. If I remember correctly, they were missing like half of their picks. And then the Jaguars got rid of Blake Bortles, which has got to be a sigh of relief. But then at the same time, They got a worse Blake Bortles, right? Like, again, I'm one of those people. I speak statistically. I do not care about your opinion. The stats say, well, he's actually a worse, Nick Foles is a worse regular season quarterback than Blake Bortles has been historically, and that's with the franchise he's familiar with. Thinking about Nick Foles going to Jacksonville, Florida from Philly in a new offensive system on a much less talented roster. I understand that, yeah, the Jags had a pretty good defense. The Jags did beat the Colts last year. But I don't think that ever happens again. And I go out of my way to say I don't think Frank Reich will ever let a game end 6-0 ever again in his career. I think that he figured it out. There's a fine line between being aggressive and being smart. And I think that you can be both, right? Like, you can be really aggressive and score a bunch of points, but you can also take points when they're free, keep control of the game. And a thing that I think that you'll see the Colts do moving forward, should, again, everyone stay healthy, right, is be in the driver's seat earlier in football games to put them away, right? And that's what this year will be. This to me, remember, this is supposed to be year 2 of 3 of a rebuild. I digress. I don't think this is year 2 of 3 of a rebuild. I think we're in year 1 of chasing a title. Right? I'm not saying we're going to get there. I'm just saying, like, if you were going to go there, it's the next 3 of the next 4 years, right? That's what I was. If you start looking at the other good teams in the NFL and look at their early schedule, and you're like, they're going 2-2. Like, they're not coming out of that unscathed. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. For the record, is I'm pretty sure the Dolphins are doo-doo. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Right, and that was the whole podcast. Is remember the great thing about this particular conversation is, remember, from the Colts' perspective, all they care about is get better every day, 1% better every day, 1-0 for the day, 1-0 for the week. What's going to happen with this fan base and this franchise when you go to San Diego and get your mouth smacked, right? And realize, like, oh, we aren't the only well-run franchise in the NFL. I know we're used to the Tennessees, the Jacksonvilles, and the Houstons, but hey, there are, in my mind, there's 3 or 4 teams in the AFC and 3 or 4 teams in the NFC that have the coaching, the personnel, the game plan to match and mirror the Colts. Like you said, the Saints are one of those teams. The Bears are one of those teams. And then in the AFC, in my mind, it's every year, right? It's either Baltimore or Pittsburgh, New England, and San Diego, or LA, or whatever you want to call them this year. And I understand that now we have to talk about the Chiefs because of Patrick Mahomes, but I'm one of those people. Football is a team game, and you can think all day long, Chiefs fans, that Patrick Mahomes is the second coming of whichever deity you choose. But the reality is that's just a single person. And that defense is looking pretty devoid of talent. And come playoff time or come playoff push time, it's going to be real difficult when that offense gets beat up and those players miss games and you lose football games because your defense is a wet paper bag. So we're, of course, Colts fans are in a fortunate position to be one of very few teams in the NFL with a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. And again, Steven, it's been wonderful talking to you, brother. We made it to an hour. I think I only said one dirty word. So I think we're good. Huh? I'll tell you, one of those things is you got to be able to turn it on and turn it off. But when you're talking football, my brain is going to struggle to get out of the frame of BSing about sports and talking to an audience of ages. So of course we want to keep it clean and family friendly. So that's our goal. But again, the podcast here, episode 1, obviously I think it went swimmingly, but then again, I'm hosting, so I get to say that. And then Obviously, really lucky to have you here, Stephen. Of course, I'm happy to get to talk shop with just about anybody, but I'll certainly do it with you every day of the week. And then, of course, thank you to our guest. We had Chris Shepard, one of my favorite Stampede Blue content creators. Just some of the work he's done evaluating offensive line talent, and he's kind of our Baldy, right? Every great organization has its Baldy. I'd love to see him get into to doing a video film breakdown with this fancy computer. I hear that stuff's coming too. Anything going on for you as far as content wise this year? I'll kind of throw in there at the end what I'm going to be doing this year outside of podcasting and doing the post game wrap. Steven, you're kind of all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Hopefully it's more stories like Kenny Moore helping Max and Chica, right? Like that was just a great story over the summer. Here we are, and like I said, I know I said at the beginning, we're kind of in the doldrums. There's not a lot going on, and then out of left field comes a story about Kenny Moore. And I don't know if you, I know Stephen, you probably heard of it, but anybody that hears this, if you want to look it up, Kenny Moore, basically, if I understand the story correctly, basically saw a little boy's dog get hit by a car and stopped and realized that the dog was going to make it. It just needed help and got this kid in his car and drove him to at least, if I remember correctly, 2 different veterinarians until they found one that could do the surgery. And not only did the dog survive, but it made a big deal in this kid's life. And then, unbeknownst to that, obviously, I believe the kid's name was Max. Unbeknownst to Max, the kid that helped him out was Kenny Moore, who just signed a big contract with the Colts. So not only did he get him a big Colts fan, but you saved a dog. You obviously going to change the world of someone that's going through what Max was going through personally. But then, you know, to just do something that selfless when we live in a world where people are very selfish is a welcome sight, you know, as opposed to reading about arrests and domestic violence and drugs and PED use. Hey, man. Yeah, right. Because they're people, because they're members of our community. These are people from all over the United States that had to take, you know, what family that they have, right, and move basically potentially across the country. You know, the Colts drafted guys from both coasts this year, so we had a guy from Stanford, a guy from Rutgers, move to Indianapolis or not, right, and try to maintain 2 abodes. Yeah, right. So you have people from all over the United States moving their lives to Indianapolis, fitting into the community very well. I cannot tell you, especially as somebody. I know that I don't tweet a lot. I know I'm not very active on. I'm not as active on Twitter as a lot of people. I'm not. I don't write as much as a lot of the writers, a lot of the staff. But I've been so impressed with Eric Ebron specifically and the positivity that he's brought to the locker room and that cup overfloweth. And then you see Jacoby Brissett just enjoying being part of a team. And to me, I get it, man. People want to pay to see a winner, right? Hey, if I'm putting this hat and I'm going to spend this money on this jersey, I want that team to win. At the same time, these are kind of shepherds for your city. These are stewards for your community. And these are the people that have the most face time, right? So to me, like you said, the Colts have done fantastic on social media. All their video production's been great. And it's I don't know if you saw it. Blue was the 2018 mascot of the year. That just got announced in the last couple days. So we got the world going for us, obviously barring injury, and we would never wish that on anyone else. So certainly we wish it on our own. But this is the most complete the Colts rosters looked in my eyes going into a training camp that I can remember since, like you said, since the Super Bowl era, the 2006. And then, obviously the 2010 team, we lost the Super Bowl in 2010 to the Saints. For the record, I said that last year, Colts over the Saints in the Super Bowl, and I was off by a year. So for those of you wondering, like, hey, who do you think wins the Super Bowl this year? Of course, I think the Colts win over the Saints in a revenge game, because I said it last year and I was wrong. So so obviously fresh slate, no stories told. I like the Saints out of the NFC, and I like the Colts out of the AFC, and then I just want to see Quentin Nelson in a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? I want to see that kind of offensive line play on the biggest stage, right? Not one of the minor stages, not prior. I want Super Bowl. And of course, Jim Irsay saying greatness is 3 Super Bowl championships in a row. And if there's a franchise in the NFL that's going to do it, it's Indy, right? Because it ain't New England. They may be able to get to the mountaintop, baby, but they ain't getting over the finish line. But yeah, it's going to be a good year, right? Right. Absolutely. So, hey, with that, we'll wrap up episode 1 of Podcast to be Named. We were going to call ourselves the Air Raid Podcast, like Jared Air, Stephen Reed Raid, Air Raid. But I found out that Texas Tech faithful, of course, have a Air Raid podcast, and that offense was kind of made popular at Texas Tech. So, of course, I have to go back over our names. I know right now, as far as Stampede Blue staff, we are coordinating content that we're going to be putting out moving forward. I know that our fearless leader, Brett Mock, has been working diligently to establish a kind of creation platform and a kind of schedule so that we can kind of make sure that we're putting out content consistently and not overlapping. You're going to see a lot more podcasts from the Colts. This year, I'll be doing, just to close here, I'll be doing Fantasy Football Weekly. I haven't decided whether I'll do that in video, audio, or text form. I will be doing, obviously, podcasting, shooting for 1 to 2 a week. I know Chris Blystone had said he was thinking about doing 3 episodes a week. Stephen Holder is going to do a couple, 1 to 2 podcasts a week for us. So heavily invested in the future of podcasting. And, of course, Stephen Reed and I, hey, we want to get in that game too. So we're going to come to you live. Maybe once or twice a week. I was thinking maybe Tuesday, Thursday to kind of offset Mr. Blystone, but we'll kind of work on that from there. And with that, we bid you adieu. Again, this is Jared and Stephen Reed from Stampede Blue, and we will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day.